Okay, welcome all of you who have joined our only second Leon's Library live event here on YouTube. This is my YouTube channel. I haven't used it in a while, and then decided to start this open live chat with folks who wanted to join in and to discuss some of the treacherous situations that are confronting moms and dads in our divorce and family courts today. But also on a broader perspective to discuss many of our contemporary issues, which do impact parents, much like, for example, our own Justice Department treating parents now as domestic terrorists. Many parents are up in arms about that. We probably never thought we'd see such a day, and yet here it is upon us. Again, my name is Leon Koziol. I practice law in federal and state courts of New York for more than 23 years. I took a stand against my profession after seeing so much of the corruption that was occurring in these courts, lawyers that were creating needless conflict to elevate their fees, and ultimately causing great harm to children in the end, the very people that supposedly the family court is designed to protect, the so-called best interests of the child. Leon's Library is a open discussion arena. It's still in the works. We are ironing a lot of bugs, but we're getting there. And I think we're getting better by the day, showing by the increase in the subscriptions, showing by the participation, the many calls that I'm getting the following day. And so I encourage you to continue to get people involved, have them subscribe. Then you will learn on a regular basis what our topics are. We hope to feature expert guest contributors from time to time, maybe twice a week or so, and then have open mic on the other 3 days. We're going to go 5 days a week. Yesterday was our introductory session. We had no live talk then, but just to orient people to what we were doing. And this is our second day. And shortly, I will open the studio here to anyone who wants to call in. We're going to do that by a phone number that you can call. That number is area code 315-796-4000. Again, 315-796-4000. And as soon as I'm done with this monologue, I will allow people to call in if you would like. Otherwise, I have much to present, and let's hope that this Leon's Library talk show continues. The Leon's Library concept, the program that you're watching, is sponsored by the Citizen Commission Against Corruption. It is a not-for-profit organization that was created in July of this year. In September, the IRS gave us tax-exempt status under 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code. So contributions to the CCAC are now tax-exempt. You could find our website or just contact us, and we would be happy to tell you some of the things we're working on. The CCAC was designed to provide an avenue to obtain oversight, to do the job that our official oversight agencies are not doing. And so we hope to look into many cases around the country, maybe issue reports on their behalf, possibly join any lawsuits that they may have in place. I know yesterday there was a discussion, those who were texting into this program about at least one lawsuit that I noted later. And we can provide input and assist those, even provide referrals, attorney referrals for those who are perhaps expert in the area. I know there are a lot out there who have contacted me about federal lawsuits. And I'll tell you a little bit about the one I filed roughly 10 years ago. As I stated, I took a stand against my profession. This was roughly in the year 2010. At that time, that I sustained a lot of retributions, which only got worse over the years. In response, I created the Parenting Rights Institute, an organization that sponsored a lot of events. One that was, for example, in front of the Federal Appeals Court in Manhattan. A good number of parents came down to support my precedent-seeking lawsuit at that time. It was begun as a class action. It became one that, on civil rights grounds, that reached the United States Supreme Court. That case is known as Parent versus State. Those are pseudonyms. They aren't real people. The idea was parent to represent parents similarly situated. Myself as a victim and a lead plaintiff in that case, and then state, being the state of New York. In that particular case, it was filed in federal court, but one that was intended to represent divorce and family courts throughout the country, those who are depriving us of that ultimate parenting right that the Supreme Court has declared to be the oldest liberty interest protected by our Constitution. So a number of the topics that I wanted to address today, one involves parent alienation, and another involves human rights violations, especially as we see parents being now depicted as domestic terrorists simply because they want a greater involvement in their children's education. So keep in mind that this live talk show is republished on my YouTube channel and followed by many people after the fact. So even though you may not be able to catch all of our daily programs starting at 7:30, same channel, same effort like you got on today, that you can always catch the program the following day throughout at any time. These shows will be on my YouTube channel, the videos that you can always check to see which one you like. And for the next day's show, we will, right after this show, for example, I will give you some background on what we will feature next. We hope to have two speakers, one that's already been confirmed, an attorney from Florida will join us on Thursday, and she will present her horrific ordeal that somewhat mirrors my own. But she's very much involved in international law, trying to have human rights addressed in front of international tribunals, something that I actually was involved with. I joined some of my fellow reformists at the United Nations, participated in a family law reform conference there. And another one years earlier that was sponsored, for example, by Dr. Joe Sorge of Divorce Court. Many of you are familiar with him. And I was featured at his event back in 2014. Again, a family law reform conference that he sponsored in Washington, D.C. Joe's really not involved as much as he once was, but he still has a base camp where you can log in and participate in discussion regarding parental rights and corruption in these courts. In any event, we hope to also have Stephen Boyd at some point in time. I'm very glued to his particular situation because he lost a 2-year-old daughter years ago, and to the mother of the child, who refused to give up the child to a custody change order, and the delayed action on that order allowed the mother to murder the 2-year-old child, and she's now doing a life sentence. So it is a case that got a lot of news coverage, and he has a foundation that I was privileged to make a presentation before. This was a couple of Saturdays ago, a foundation gala down in New Rochelle. So hopefully Steve will also join us. And among many other guest contributors, Dr. Anthony Pappas, retired professor of St. John's University. He has quite an ordeal that he could present to you, and he's focused heavily on judicial immunity. So those are only some of the things that we're working on early on. Again, I'm going to allow people to call in if you like. That number is 315-796-4000 in just a minute. But spread the word about what we're doing here, because the more subscribers we get, the more influence that we have. And we really need a unifying force throughout this country. I know on my Facebook following, I have thousands of followers between Facebook, my website, leonkoziol.com, and now the growing numbers that are beginning to show here on this YouTube channel. And those, I catch a lot of stories, a lot of the posts on Facebook about individuals that need to talk to someone, need to share their ordeals, need to know that they're not isolated and alone. And so those folks now have an opportunity to join us here. This is going to be a very informal, conversational type of program. I may be dressed up like I feel I should as a person, a professional, and so forth. And there will be a lot of individuals calling in and perhaps growing from what we're trying to do here. For example, recently I published a book. It's entitled Whistleblower in Paris. And it was just released in July, published by Author House. And you can get it at any Barnes & Noble store or any of the major national bookseller sites. It's quite the story about my ordeal, but also educates you to what I call a silent epidemic. The corruption that is occurring in divorce and family courts throughout the country, and how they're getting away with this, Title IV defunding that incentivizes conflict. So many things that I believe folks like you need to be aware of. And then, you might be able to take that information into your litigation if you happen to be involved in that. So I want to just touch off a little bit about parental alienation. I'm a victim of parent alienation. I haven't talked to my daughters in a long time, haven't seen them in terms of time spent with me, their dad, for years. And they're now in college. And parent alienation was originally theorized, if you will, or constructed, made public by Dr. Richard Gardner back in the 80s. He called it parental alienation syndrome. He realized that there was a certain psychological problem emanating from parents denied contact with their children, especially over an extended period of time, and especially to the severity that some parents are experiencing, even terrible commentary from their own children, even though they are great parents and fit parents. And I've met many across the country, and I feel really bad for them. Knowing myself as a victim, I can relate. As an attorney, I was not able to relate. So, but I don't think, and I look at it differently, as in many of my reports and publications and in my book. I look at parental alienation more as a human rights violation, because I think that's more encompassing and more accurate. If you eliminate the alienation, the abusiveness by one parent, the targeting parent, if you will, then you eliminate the problem, as opposed to those who might, parental alienation syndrome and the psychiatric profession, before you know it, they have you on medication. And that is, in my view, not the solution. The solution is to correct the problem in these courts, to hold these people accountable who are getting away with parental alienation, to allow the non-custodial parent, as they like to call us, the true opportunity to have a meaningful relationship with our children. It's the system that created the custody and visitation framework, and the bar associations who oppose shared parenting that are allowing this parental alienation human rights violation to exist and persist. It's something I've challenged over the years. And as we get more time down the road, I will tell you about some of the litigation that I brought seeking to set precedent. And of course, there is such a power, I learned the hard way, there is such a power base against this. Between the bar associations, the service providers in these courts it's a gold mine. And we, the parents, are the victims that are paying for this. In many contexts, I call it a pay to parent scandal. We've also, in current events, seen a lot of news stories regarding the Justice Department, a memo that was discovered and made public regarding the treatment of parents as domestic terrorists by our own Justice Department, simply because they want to have more involvement, in their children's lives. A shocking outcome of some really bad politics today. So I don't know. We're not a political program here, but we will call out those who are harming parental rights and those who are engaging in corruption and yet are not being held accountable. Like my custody judge, who eventually admitted to pedophilia, sexual abuse of his own handicapped 5-year-old niece, Judge Brian Hedges. You can look him up. It's on my website as well. I was fortunate to get him off my case. As many as 40 judges, trial level jurists, I got off my case because of various things I learned along the way. Many, showing that they were biased, institutional bias, systemic bias, as I call it, a term I was using long before Black Lives Matter began using it. Systemic bias against parents in these courts is influenced by the Title IV defunding scheme, rewarding states and by extension judges by the number and size of child support orders that they issue. That's where you get all these abuses, the imputed income abuses, the suicides, the debtor prisons that we see, and the increases in domestic violence. It's the more custody orders that you can issue, the more money you get. And people don't know about this. And the more I try to make that public, the more they targeted me. And again, that's something you will find on my website, in my filings and reports. When we went to the Parenting Rights Institute, which I founded again back in 2010, also sponsored the Parent March on Washington more recently. That was in May 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, 2019. 3-day event that featured such things as expert speakers that we obtained to an audience at the Congressional Ballroom near the U.S. Capitol. We had a full-day lobbying initiative at the Capitol. We had parents from all over the country that delivered reports to members of Congress. We had meetings with congressional staffers. The following day, we had a march down Pennsylvania Avenue under police escort. A phenomenal event, one that stands really high in my life. An accomplishment, if you will, the idea that you're with a group of parents coming down the most auspicious thoroughfare in the world, and the police escort has all 3 lanes empty for you to come down, and from the White House to the Capitol, a 2-mile stretch. It was really awesome, and I think certainly those who participated know what I'm talking about. On the Capitol lawn, after the march, we had many speakers to an open mic session, and we had so many moms and dads not only commend the 3-day event because they felt they weren't so isolated anymore. They weren't alone in their ordeals, but they felt that this was the beginning of something big, that we could actually unite the various groups and be heard as a power base. We have no lobbying group. We have no special interest, no union that backs our needs. And so I hope through this program, Leon's Library, we can orient you to many of the issues. These books behind me, many cases I can pull off the shelves and cite them to you and help you perhaps in your many ordeals. So again, it's the Citizen Commission Against Corruption, which is sponsoring this program, and it's called Leon's Library. I'm the host. And I hope that you will share this and encourage the numbers so that we can gain subscribers on it and then become more influential as we go along. It's only our 2nd day. We're still ironing out a lot of things. But at this point, if you'd like to call in, I will put you on our live here. And you might have something you want to offer. Or I know there's a lot of activity I can see on the screen here for people who are texting in, and there's a lot of discussion going on as we speak. But we have our first caller, so let's see who this is, and we will comment and proceed accordingly. Hello, you're on Leon's Library. Go ahead.
Okay. Possibly I should turn. Hey, Leon, it's wait a second. Maybe I should turn down my volume here.
Okay.
God. Wait a second. Okay, all right, it's off. All right. Leon, Rob Malik, ACScomplaints.com. The question I'd like to ask you is, does ACS, as far as you know, legally exist? Can the council form ACS? I think they did, without votes from the public. Do you have any knowledge in reference to whether or not ACS exists legally, and whether they can be challenged on that basis regarding anyone's case at this point, regarding their their right to even defend themselves legally, that they even have been, are a legitimate corporation.
Well, there's so many organizations out there that are acting on behalf of government, or at least giving that sort of impression. And I've encouraged people to check their legitimacy, to challenge that legitimacy. You would be surprised, even here in my hometown, there is a water board. They had, after 30 years of existence, all of the things that they did over that 3-decade stretch, somebody found a flaw and challenged their legitimacy and found that the entity itself was not legally constituted. So to answer your question, it is something that requires looking into the either enabling statute or looking into how they were formed and what they're purporting to do and whether they have the legal authority to do it. I can't really answer your question in more specifics because I'm not directly involved, but it sounds like an interesting topic. How did you get involved in this?
Oh my God. How did I get involved with ACS?
Yes.
Oh, that's a whole long story. I couldn't even begin to talk about that at this point.
That's okay. That's all right.
But believe me, I will be with you every night you're on. I'll be here. So in time it'll come out, and I have my website, and I would like to encourage a continued movement with the state assembly, because many of us have spoken at the state assembly. We presented the many problems that exist, but we can't just present to them the problems. We have to work with them to come up with solutions, and to put it bluntly, not let them get away. So now that we have momentum with the assembly, don't just go and speak to them and be like, all right, I guess they'll take care of it from here on in, No, we got to stay on top of it with them. And, I don't care if it's me or you, Leon. On my website, I bought a V-Bolton, a forum. That's the best forum out there. But, it's not about me and my organization or what I'm doing. I only care about children and my daughter and everyone's children and parents. So I encourage either you, Leon, or me. I'm trying to do it to please. Let's keep the focus and the effort in the state assembly to get various laws passed. And if I can get enough people coming to my forum on my website, then I can go ahead and invite the assembly to come to the website where we can iron out laws and solutions. And you're of course welcome, Leon, and however we can help each other. I find there's an issue that exists out there of my group, my organization, your group, my members. No, we can't be like that, right? Because then we're being no different than the system itself.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. In fact, the New York Bar did a report a few years back condemning New York's trial structure. We have 11 separate trial courts in the state of New York, while California only has one. They may have divisions and so forth, but they have one trial court. It operates so much more efficiently. California being twice, not only the largest state in the union, but twice the size of the state of New York. And so the bar attacked that structure, tried to get it changed with the Constitutional Convention, which never came to be. So we operate here, and it's so lucrative for lawyers because there's always jurisdictional challenges. You have state Supreme Court, which is our general jurisdiction trial court. We have family courts, which are limited courts of jurisdiction. They often conflict. Litigants may be in one court when they should be in another. And I have, by the way, in my 14-year ordeal in these courts, I have been shot back and forth between different courts. I've challenged the legitimacy, the jurisdiction of certain courts. And it goes back to where, you got started here. But Mr. Malik, what is, can you tell those who are going to be viewing this site later on and live right now, what is the name of your website?
It's acscomplaints.com.
acscomplaints.com. Okay. You want to tell us a little bit about it, or why somebody might want to be involved with you or contact you?
Well, yeah, sure. I'm really working hard to bring together people for this cause. I'm on a class action lawsuit that I'd like to get others together with, as well as the forum in reference to the state assembly and moving forward on bills and law. And just keeping having parents stay in contact. What you're doing is great. I mean, you're essentially doing what I was thinking of, where we need to have a forum where we're communicating with each other, not just this person's website or that person's website. We need to have actual connection. So, that's why I put forth the forum. Maybe the forum in combination with your show. However, parents want to do it would be nice. But on my website, I also talk about how my daughter is dying, the severe abuse of my daughter in her situation. I have recordings on various people regarding corruption, such as Manhattan Special Victims, and I'm going. There's a lot there in reference to NYPD and ACS and Department of Investigation. I have extensive amount of recordings of these people. The website is still in development because I have so much stuff. But over the past 3 years, I've amassed a tremendous amount of evidence of corruption and recordings and cover-ups. It's unbelievable. And I'm in the process of putting it all up. But also, I like to I don't want to use the word showcase, but if any parents out there have children that have not just been taken from them, but also are being physically abused, I want to know about it, because I want to also showcase those children along with my child, and show how children are being physically abused in this system. ACS has put in their facilities no recording, no photography. That actually started with me.
Okay.
That came from me and what happened over at an ACS facility, because I recorded my daughter's statements of her being thrown by her stepbrother.
Wow. Well, you know what? We hope to be more involved and maybe get to know everybody on a personal basis at some point in time. Maybe we will all be on a first name basis. The numbers alone, I see there's a lot of chat going on as we speak. So there are a lot of individuals that have things to share. I want to thank you for calling in, Mr. Malik. And again, do so on a daily basis. That's fantastic that you've committed to doing that. We want to share different sorts of experiences and causes, and hope to work with a lot of different groups and support them. So this is a live forum for anyone who has something they want to present in terms of government corruption. Yes, we're focused on parental rights. We're focused on child abuse. We're focused on child support abuses, the full gamut of corruption going on in divorce and family courts, because mainstream media is simply not covering it. They might cover a certain event, but they don't really do a follow-up story of a documentary type to really lay out, the problem. And it really is necessary for a maybe a 2 or 3 day documentary to really get to people. So thank you, and we'll stay in touch. Thanks for calling. Okay, next we have someone calling. Okay, you're live. Go ahead.
Hey, how are you, Leon?
Hey, Glenn, how are you? I recognize your voice every time.
Yeah, long time no hear. Congratulations on your new podcast here.
Thank you.
So I'm hoping it all works out pretty good. But so things have been, we've been a little active here upstate New York, and just wanted to fill you in.
Go ahead. I know there's folks, for those who don't know, Glenn Svoboda, he's he's on our administrative, he's director of organizing for the Citizen Commission Against Corruption. And he comes with a wealth of background concerning events. He's been to practically everyone I know of, and I've been at this for 10, 12 years. He's been at it for some 30 years. And we got started early on. He's one of the first people I met way back in 2008, 9, 10, whatever it was. And I know that Glenn was at our event down in front of the Federal Appeals Court. He came down to Washington in 2019, spent all 3 days with us there. He's been to events even recently. He went out to, I believe it was St. Louis, with a group of people. They're regulars at Republican, Democrat events in Albany, New York. If there's something going on, you're having to do with parental rights and court corruption, you're probably going to see Glenn there and the group that he works with. So go ahead, Glenn. Tell us what is going on in upstate New York. I know you were for the longest time down on Long Island. I know I met you with FIT TV when you featured me back in 2011. And so now I guess you're upstate, right? What do you tell us about what you're working on?
Well, as everybody understands, I was living in Mastic Beach, Long Island, New York, and thanks to Judge Cheryl Joseph, she threw me out of my house in Mastic Beach, Long Island, and I lost all that property. So now I'm full-time upstate. So we understand how I managed to get upstate here. So it's, of course, the corruption in the court is massive, and of course, they retaliate against us whistleblowers as something fierce. Of course, I'm not the only one. You watch Cash Jackson, James Kelly, Carlos Rivera, and the list goes on and on. But
I don't mean to interrupt, but what is the story with Cash Jackson right now? I know you're close to that. I have not been able to discover. Did they extradite him, or what's the story with him?
They actually let him out. He was able to get on a GoFundMe. A lot of people raised some money for him, but they let him out of the jail. They were trying to extradite him, and that whole thing is a fraud. I mean, he had a good attorney, and they punished the attorney for defending Cash.
Yeah, I followed that story. They actually went after him, threatening, I believe his ethics, his license, and so forth. Something I'm quite familiar with, as will be the lawyer who's going to be our guest speaker on Thursday. From Florida. There's a lot more of that going on than you know. That's why you don't see attorneys taking conscientious stands like I did. I might have easily survived this, except that when they impacted my own daughters, you don't mess with daddy's little girls. You could do almost anything to me, and I might tolerate it, but you don't do that. I have two precious daughters. They're my whole world. And when they decided to use them as a mode of retaliation, that's when I went to town. It's the rest is history. But so there is a lot of that retribution going on. But when you become a whistleblower, it gets horrendously worse. I never imagined it would be as worse as it was with me. But I know Cash Jackson, I believe, I know he ran for Illinois governor on the Libertarian line, but he also did, I think, a walk across the country, ending up in Washington, D.C., if I'm not mistaken. He's a military veteran. And I guess he got in trouble when he finally, after all these years of frustration, and I know how that could happen. He, I guess, was accused, at least now, indicted for making threats against two judges in Illinois. And that's where the extradition issue comes in, because he's living in Arkansas. But I've been following that because that's, obviously very serious. But it also, in my view, like Thomas Ball, as you know, Glenn, he's the guy up in New Hampshire who burned himself alive in front of a New Hampshire courthouse, a family court, because he was denied access to his daughter. I mean, he made the mistake, I guess you could call it, where he was trying to discipline his young girl, and he slapped her. All right. And that was, I think, the big issue there. But they put him through way too much, therapy and too long of a separation. I don't believe they would have done that if a mother had been involved. And we'll have more on that as we go along. Guests that have been involved with me that have been one gentleman who's had custody for many years has not been able to get a dime of child support. When it's flipped, there's a big difference. And we'll bring actual people on board, and moms who suffered dearly. I've worked with moms around the country who suffered severe parental alienation. And so we're all in this together. And I get really angry when I see everybody trying to make it in terms of a mom versus dad situation. This is about human rights, as Jim Kelly said on the Capitol lawn back in 2019. He was right about that. And until we recognize that, we have the Commission against Commission to Study Custody Forensic Evaluations, Governor Kathy Hochul. We had hearings September 23rd. I testified along with Tony Sabelli, you know him, Glenn, and he alerted me that my presentation, the video was cut out. And so I did a follow-up on that. that got really ugly. I actually got a letter from their general counsel. I challenged that woman because she was saying that my inquiries about my exclusion was harassment. And so I raised the point that since when is government accountability deemed harassment? This is the way they avoid accountability and how they abuse this whole notion of domestic violence for improper purposes. And we need to get together for the real victims. And for those who file the false charges, they should be held accountable. They're destroying entire careers of moms and dads when they bring these false charges. And they're allowing too much of that in divorce and family courts. It's creating the point where parents who once at least got along in separation now are all but ready to kill each other. And we've seen that too. Murder-suicides. A police investigator in my hometown, Joe Longo, they took everything from him, his guns, confiscated the protection orders, and he did the simple task. He left child support court and murdered the mother of his children of 4, with a common kitchen knife. So we have to look at these situations. They're not isolated. There's a lot of connections, and the lawyers on the bench are behind all this. They're allowing this. They're not looking for reform. They're not holding the abusers accountable. When I say abusers, I'm talking about those who are creating needless conflict and profiting from that. It's a big issue with me because it's not really known. But Glenn, what are you working on now? What do you know about Cash? So Cash Jackson has been let out on bail, then I take it?
Well, yes. So we understand, again, this court system is run like the drug cartel. There's really very little difference. They blackmail people, they extort, they accuse people. But just getting back now to Cash Jackson, well, that's Veterans Liberty Network. I had worked with Sabelli and Frank Hand when we went to D.C. just prior to the shutdown. Of course, Cash Jackson was in D.C., so we all went out there. And these fellas decided to start some with a clique because they're all veterans. The veterans are getting crucified.
Yes, they are.
You realize that. So they came up with this idea, Veterans Liberty Network, which is basically with some of their studies that they found out a lot of the suicides from veterans are because of the court system. They attack them anyway financially, throwing them in the street.
Thomas Ball was a veteran.
Yes, of course. Yes, sir. Yes. And of course, through you, I mentioned Thomas Ball and, of course, several others there. But, yes. And so their studies show that, again, the suicides are not just because of the pandemic, by no means, way, shape, or form. It's from really the problems with family court. A lot of these veterans, whether it be male or female, they carried weapons, and the courts use them as a detriment to their children because they have this background, with assault weapons, and they get punished for this. So this led us to. I got fortunate enough to run against Republican Derek Gibson. Running for governor, the Republican Party ran under the Republican Party, but the Republican Party really attacked Derek Gibson, and he was being sponsored through Veterans Liberty Network. And because Derek Gibson is one of the few people that are going after the courts. You understand? They're blaming the courts. They're outright speaking at all these GOP events. So we confronted Lee Zeldin. I know Lee Zeldin from Massac Beach. And because he's from Shirley, which is the adjacent town, it's called the Tri-Hamlet. So I know Lee, what's his name there? What did I just say?
Lee Zeldin?
Lee Zeldin, I know him for quite a long time. I know him for probably 15 years. I used to talk with him in the civic groups all the time. And I always was talking about legal reform, so we've been chasing Lee Zeldin around. I actually got thrown out of Colony. A bunch of us, Sabelli, we had the police there. As soon as we mentioned the family courts.
Yeah.
So they're all corrupted. We don't go with the Democrats too much because, the Democrats have been part of the Trial Lawyers Association for decades. And we know the Republican Party don't want to talk about this. And we've been forcing them to talk about it. So we want you to understand that they really have to start getting up. Now, I work with Chris Haig up here. And I talk to them all the time. I say, how come you don't mention this on any of your web pages? You know, they have all these posts on YouTube. They refuse to talk about this subject. So everybody out there just needs to know that this system, you know, the Trial Lawyers Association Judiciary runs this country as tight-knit as you could possibly see. And nobody wants to talk about this subject. So we all had it. They're attacking mothers rampantly. It's a full-blown, catastrophic event what's taking place with this country right now. So
It is, Glenn. And again, I've called it a silent epidemic because the news of it is being suppressed. When the media, like, for example, when Joe Sorge held his event in Washington, this 3-day family law reform conference, he had people from all over the country, delegates, if you want to call it that. And when it was over, and it was a watershed event, it was a very good event. Workshops, experts, speakers, all kinds. I attended. I was actually, I was fortunate to get an ovation given the sacrifices that I, along with others like Susan Settenbrino, an attorney from New York, also targeted. It's nice to see when we're not isolated. You want to talk about isolation? Read my book, Whistleblower in Paris. I was in Paris to escape the persecution, and they were abusing child support laws to target me. They couldn't find anything else. There were no crimes, although they tried to orchestrate that as well. If they want you, they will get you. And of course, as my book points out, it's not like they all got together in some room and suddenly decided, well, let's go get Leon Koziol. That's not what happened. What they did is they, through a joint effort, I was targeted. And so once you are targeted, you are then, no matter where you go, they're going to do things to harm you. They're going to do things to make your life hard. They're going to, take your children from you. They're going to find two college degrees that I never obtained was conferred upon me by a family court judge. It's a true story. I raised it in front of the Moreland Commission on Public Corruption. I said, we have, his name is Daniel King. I mean, he's running for a re-election now up in Lewis County, New York. And I hope that either the Republicans get a candidate against him and primary him, or a Democrat candidate comes along. It's a very rural, small populated county, but they sent me up there because everybody in my much larger county of Oneida, that's the Utica-Rome area, had stepped down from my case. And many were judges, people that I knew, I hung out with, and they did the right thing. They stepped down because they knew me. Others had it out for me and they refused to step down. Those became very controversial and the subject of many of my lawsuits. Syracuse is the big city in our judicial district. And I went through a whole bunch of Syracuse judges, and I could tell you stories there that would blow your mind. Again, you will find many of them. And again, only a small portion of my ordeal in my recently published book, Whistleblower in Paris. Again, you can get that at Barnes & Noble's, all the major bookseller sites. So it's good to see that you're involved in politics, because we really aren't going to get anywhere unless we know how government operates. And that's what I like about the early callers here, that they are actively involved. They understand that the system, how it works, and that's what we need to focus on. Because, it's nice to talk about camaraderie and all the things that are on Facebook that people enjoy talking about. This is not something that is popular. It's a difficult subject. Nobody wants to revisit their most horrific experiences. In fact, Alec Baldwin is back in the news, with the killing of a person on his set as a producer. And here's his book, A Promise to Ourselves, which he published in 2008. I was invited to his book signing. His signature appears right here. He signed it and autographed it. He left the movement. He got involved, worked with many, parent rights groups, and suddenly disappeared because it was too much. In the book, and I reprinted it in my book. He describes his various efforts to commit suicide. And many people have forgotten that. That was, front page news back in 2008, because that's what the media focused on regarding his book, as opposed to his message of reform. And his book did a wonderful job of exposing the corruption in the California court system, which is really no different than New York. Every state in its own way, if they're taking federal funds under Title 4D, they're inherently biased. They have a systemic bias. They're inherently corrupt, like those federal judges that were recently exposed for partaking in lawsuits where they had a financial interest. And unfortunately, it's exposed after the fact, after the damage is done. And so we need to target these judges, these lawyers. I have targeted very many of them. I put them on my website. I featured them. I tagged them. So when you looked up these judges, their profiles, you would find welcome to leonkoziol.com and what's really going on with these judges. And that really was effective in terms of a weapon against the corruption, and explains highly why they targeted me so viciously. On Thursday, a Florida lawyer will be my guest, and she will tell you how she was targeted. And again, I just mentioned Susan Settembrino. So many lawyers across the country I have met that were targeted, suspended, or disbarred. I'm still a member of the New York Bar. They came after me and they suspended me. They won't reinstate me over this child support issues and others that were created by my secretary. Again, all that's explained in my book. Too much to relate here. But my website also brings a lot of it out. A lot to be learned there. So thanks for participating, Glenn. One of these days, one of these shows, I'd like to feature you, and you could maybe have sort of a prepared outline of what you have been working on, and so that people could ask you questions as well. As we continue to develop this program, Leon's Library, we will get to a point where we can, ask questions of the callers, for example. I hope to do that very soon and expand the program accordingly. So, all right, Glenn, we'll stay in touch. Anybody else who wants to call, the number here is area code 315-796-4000. Again, 315-796-4000. Kind of an easy number to remember, and it's one I'm using now because it allows me to have direct communication with the caller without the noise, the background, and the other things like we experienced. Well, we did with our first caller, but we corrected that right away. The interferences, the talkovers, those things, I think are reduced highly when we do it this way. And we'll continue to improve on the format as we go along. One of the things I would like to expound upon is a subject I discussed earlier, and that had to do with Governor Kathy Hochul's Blue Ribbon Commission on custody forensic evaluations. It was a commission created by Governor Andrew Cuomo when he was in office. Governor Hochul took it over, and they had two public hearings in September, one on September 9th, one on September 23rd. The governor opened up the first session, and it continued into the second one. I gave testimony along with many others. I know some that are on are viewing this program right now had also testified. And I'm very concerned about it because I was advised by one of the other speakers that my video had been deleted. In other words, there were many speakers, and this was a virtual public hearing. They want input from the public. And then when we did give the input, they treated us differently. Some speakers, called in from their cars, for example. Others from their homes. In my case, I did it from this studio. Had the respect to, to present in formal attire. And next thing you know, you could only hear my voice. You couldn't hear who I was and so forth. And that really incensed me, so that I contacted the sponsors, and it turned out to be and it was right there. The women on the other end of my screen who were hosting it were employees of the state's Office for the Prevention of Domestic Violence. And I don't know how that office was given the responsibility of overseeing and supervising and even conducting that public hearing. So obviously it got me suspicious. And so I contacted the person whose email was on the advertisements, the enticements, if you will, the notices, the public notices of this public hearing, and her name, her identity, phone number, all that were provided. And that's what I used. I contacted that person and was quickly informed that she was just a technical participant, not really involved, something along those lines. I really interpreted to mean that she wasn't involved at all. And clearly she was. And so she kicked it up to her boss and said that, let her boss handle it. I objected to the extent that I wasn't going to go around with New York's bureaucratic structure as it is, run around trying to get through all the red tape to figure out whose boss's boss was what and why was this entity hosting this and where was the blue ribbon panel? Where did they hear the testimony? Were they in the rooms? It didn't look like they were there. All you saw was the two women working for the domestic violence agency. And in my complaint, I compared the hearing process, this oversight process, if you will, to the very dysfunction of New York government itself. In the Moreland Commission, for those of you who followed it, I was invited to testify there too. That was a much bigger entity. They called it the who's who of law enforcement experts and professionals across the state of New York. And indeed, they were district attorneys. There were law enforcement experts, police chiefs, commissioners, and so forth, psychiatrists that were on that commission. And suddenly, Governor Cuomo, after he heard all this testimony implicating these top leaders of the legislature and even himself, he dissolved that commission prematurely. And Preet Bharara, who was one of the speakers, he spoke just before I did, happened to be a federal prosecutor. And he seized the files and then ended up convicting and putting in prison the top leaders of our state legislature, both leaders of the Assembly and the Senate. Even a top aide, Governor Cuomo's top aide of Governor Cuomo himself was also indicted and convicted. And these people are still in the news today, now we see, as karma would come around, even though Governor Cuomo escaped accountability then, he's now in all sorts of accountability issues, as we all know, and I won't get into all that. That's why he resigned, and Kathy Hochul is now our new governor, and we have an election coming up next year. That election, we'll talk about that in future shows. That's shaping up to be a fascinating one that's going to be followed all across the country, much like the Virginia governor race was this past year. I mean, we'll talk about that too. And in fact, you could call in and talk about it anytime. That's fine as well. But ultimately, I got a letter. I thought it was from this woman's boss at the Office of Prevention of Domestic Violence. And it came from, it turned out as I read closer, it was from the general counsel for the Office for the Prevention of Domestic Violence. And that's when I hit the roof, because she said, just because she's a public servant, as you say, Mr. Koziol, that doesn't allow you to harass her. And then I hit the roof. I wrote promptly back to her. These were email exchanges. There were only a few. It wasn't like, there was some a pattern or trend here, a pattern of harassment events and so forth. There's nothing like that here. And in my responsive email, I started by saying, since when was public accountability deemed harassment? What a wonderful way to insulate government from accountability altogether. Just call it harassment, And of course, it was none of that. And so I made it clear to her I was going over her head. And with that still in process, I am going to hold these people accountable, because this commission is becoming the very farce that the Moreland Commission was. These window dressing entities that are created to make we, the public, the victims, the complainants, feel like there's something going on there, that we're really holding these government officials accountable. Nonsense. It's not happening. And that's why I've even come to be, for that matter. I saw the ethics committee and what they did. The ones that did the witch hunt against me, they were allowed to resign for, get this now, falsifying their timesheets. Yeah, that's right. Falsifying their timesheets. I mean, if you and I did that, and is in my course of my law practice, one gentleman who used the city gas card for a reimbursement, which was what they owed him, $16. By the time the weekend was over, they had him arrested on felony counts. So how did people like Bernie Madoff get away with all those years, up to $70 billion, before they finally caught him? What is going on here? And the oversight committees are simply not doing their jobs. And these three lawyers, these so-called ethics lawyers, should have been, there were no public charges brought against them. Meanwhile, I've been going through reinstatement applications for 10 years. They didn't have to go through any. And they're the standard bearers of lawyer ethics. Now, this is important, folks. They're the ones charged with the responsibility of preventing overbilling practices. Now, this was 2013 when they were allowed to resign. They should have been fired, perhaps arrested, whatever, okay? But they escaped accountability as far as I'm concerned. That was 2013, so imagine all these years and what's really going on and the targeting. And so there's a lot there to talk about. In coming shows, I will give you detail that will absolutely shock you. And then you will realize that what you're going through is not so shocking after all. There's a reality that is occurring here, and you should not feel isolated. Perhaps you should feel vindicated when this program brings out so many victims and then brings you to the point to realize that we need to get together. We have to form a public interest group, a special interest, if you want to call it that protects parents and gets accountability in these courts. But again, we're open to all kinds of topics. So if you still want to call, we'll stick around a few more minutes. Again, if you want to call into the program, this is Leon's Library. The number here, area code 315-796-4000. Again, 315-796-4000. So we hope to also advocate for people. If you look up the sponsor of this program, the Citizen Commission Against Corruption, you will see some of the things that we're doing. Again, that's an organization I incorporated as a nonprofit back in July. I'm the president of that organization. We have a board of directors, and we have one of the callers here was happened to be our director of organizing, vice president of organizing, Glenn Svoboda. We have others that are involved, and we continue to grow. So you will look at what we're going to be looking at some issues and hope to get involved. As a commission, we're sort of like a shadow commission over the government agencies and commissions that aren't doing their job. And so hopefully in time, we'll be able to get the publicity by mainstream media and events that we need to organize. For example, showing up in court on behalf of somebody who's being aggrieved, who's not being properly represented, and so forth. We can get you a referral of somebody that we will then monitor to make sure that they don't abuse you and get away with it. So there's so many things that this Citizen Commission Against Corruption is meant to do and will hopefully do as we continue to grow. So again, hopefully you will add to our subscription base. Call your friends and relatives, tell them to get involved and call in or just listen in. It's fine. We will have some great expert contributors coming up. Like I said, we have a Florida attorney on Thursday. Hopefully we'll have Dr. Pappas on Monday. And then we will hopefully get Stephen Boyd as well involved. He's the head of the Gabriella Boyd Foundation. So with that, I will close this session. These programs are republished on my YouTube channel. So if you missed it or someone else who couldn't get to it should be appraised of it, they can simply come back on this YouTube channel at any time. Find the video that is relative to today, the live talk video, and you can hear it all over again and then maybe get more information that may have gotten by you. I see there was a lot of activity here with regard to the chats that are going on, and they have now slowed down to pretty much down to nothing, but it was very active throughout this 1 hour session. So I want to thank you all for participating in whichever way you did, as a listener, a texter, or if you want to get in touch with me by Gmail, it's leonkoziol@gmail.com. And for the callers who called in. In any event, I'd like to end this session right now and encourage you to be here, same time, same YouTube channel tomorrow, 7:30 Eastern Time. And you will enjoy more of informative sessions and live discussions that you might find intriguing and certainly informative. So again, thank you for participating, and good night to all.